All right, go ahead, take it away.
All right, so I'm wearing the mask because I'm near the gibbons, and instead of doing a PowerPoint presentation, I'm actually outside with some food next to the gibbons. So very soon you're gonna see some gibbons. And so yes, my name is Gabriella Skollar, and I'm the director of the Gibbon Conservation Center. And I'm originally from Hungary. I wrote my thesis on gibbons. And after I graduated in Hungary, I came here just to volunteer and help take care of the gibbons. And that was in 2005. And eventually I applied for a scholarship. I was able to continue my studies. And I was working with the founder, Alan Mutnik, for about 7 years, and just kind of learn from him how to care for the gibbons and what it's like working at a conservation center. And today we have 38 gibbons at the center. The youngest one is only a month old, and the oldest one is 38. And we have 4 staff who just kind of care for the center, and that's including, you know, feeding the gibbons 6 to 8 times a day, doing enrichment, putting in toys, and building new enclosures, writing grants, running the social media, just kind of everything. But we also have volunteers, and we always have open positions to fill in for volunteers, helping with food prep and yard work and doing observations, behavior observations. And if somebody volunteer for like 100 hours, they can also kind of learn how to be a caregiver, and we train them and work with volunteers to learn how to care for the gibbons. So there's many different opportunities. Or if somebody wants to do their own study, we have a committee that will review research proposals. And if it's non-invasive and help the understanding of gibbons, then we will approve it and they can do their own studies here. Or they can also participate in different research projects that we already do here. And they can learn, they can gain some research experience as well. So I'm gonna figure out how to switch my screen so you can actually see some gibbons.
Let me, oh, you, perfect.
Okay, and so this is Howard. He's a pileated gibbon, so of course he wants to grab the iPad. And then soon there will be other gibbons joining here. So this is Boo. She's the big sister of Howard, and Mom is kind of ignoring us and not as interested joining us. And you're blocking our view, Howard. Here comes Mom. So these are pileated gibbons, and I'm gonna give them just a little puzzle feeder. So they're gonna stay around while I'm talking about them. And this is actually just a very simple low enrichment device made of PVC. And they kind of have to manipulate it to get the food out. I put some berries and other soft fruits in there. Howard already wants it. Okay, let me just clip it to one. I'll grab another one so they don't fight over it. All right. So this is something we try to do every day besides the regular feeding. So give them some other enrichments that they have to kind of figure out how to get the food out, or giving them a new toy like a rubber ball or a Kong that they can just kind of play because they are very playful. And just give them some extra things to do. This is a family, so Tuk is the mother and the 2 offspring. So they also spend a lot of time interacting with each other, grooming each other, chasing each other, wrestling. So they tend to be very active. And it's always a lot of fun to just sit here and observe them. Pileated gibbons are found in Indonesia, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and they are endangered due to habitat loss and hunting. And worldwide, they keep them in a global captive breeding program. And we have several ones born at the center, but Tuk, the mother, came from Switzerland. With the male, the adult male came from Japan, and they had 4 offspring here. And she's still housed with her 2 youngest offspring, Howard and Boo. And she has 2 other daughters that are, the oldest one is paired up with a young male, and Izzy is able to send to Europe to also paired up with another one. And you don't see the adult male because she didn't get along with him. So after they were living together for about 15 years, the 2 started fighting with each other, and we were not able to house them together anymore. So Domino was sent to another zoo, and he was paired up with another female. Gibbons in a wild, living in family groups, and they are serial monogamous. So they usually have 1 partner at a time, but sometimes they have low affairs. So they're not necessary, the offspring living together are not necessarily related to the father. So what we learned that they have a more flexible social system, and they also not always mate for life. So some couples do and some don't. And we see that kind of here as well. There are couples that live together their whole life and they bonded and loving, but there are also couples that after several years, they get bored with each other or they start fighting. So kind of see everything. But if they are happily living together, then they usually very good parents and they raise their offspring together. And their offspring stay with them until about 8 to 9 years old. And at around that age, their parents push them out of their territory. And we see that here as well in captivity, that once their offspring is around 8, 9 years old, their parents become aggressive towards them. And at the same time, they also start challenging their parents. And eventually we have to move them out. So the other interesting things, that the pileated gibbons are sexually dichromatic. The adult male is black and the adult female is blonde, but you see these darker patches on their chest and the top of the head and on the sides of their face. When they born blonde, and it takes about 1.5 years to have those darker patches on the chest and the top of the head. And then once they are around 6 years old, they're gonna start turning a little bit darker and there'll be more black on the sides of their face. And then when the male is around 7, 8 years old, they keep changing and eventually they're gonna turn black. So by the time the male is like 10 years old, they're gonna be fully black with the white hands and white feet, and then some white markings around the face. And pileated actually mean cap. So it looks like they're wearing a cap on the top of their head. So that's how they got their name. And then I can go a little bit closer so you can see their feet. So their feet is very interesting. They have opposable big toes and they use those, the feet like to hold things, to hold on the fencing, and sometimes also to hold objects or hang upside down. So it's very useful. And then you can kind of see them stealing food from each other, that food sharing. You can see how she's holding the pipe with her foot. And then very important information also, no tail. So gibbons are apes, and that's the most visible difference between a monkey and an ape, that apes don't have a tail. Gibbons were the first apes that evolved sometimes around 70 million years ago. And we still share about 96% of our DNA with gibbons. They were the first apes that kind of branched off. And there's 20 species. So here, this is just one species, the pileated gibbons. But at the center, we have 5 different species. And we have gibbons from all 4 genera. The pileated gibbons belong to the genus called Halobates, and they have 44 diploid chromosome numbers. they genetically very far from other genera. So that's also interesting that within one genus, the different species are more similar. They have more similar vocalizations and of course genetics.
We have a question about
Yes.
enrichment. So do all of the gibbons respond in similar ways to enrichment, or do they have individual preferences?
Definitely they have individual preferences, and like this puzzle feeder, sometimes it's a little bit hard for the gibbons to manipulate and figure it out. And there are gibbons that they get anxious and they get stressed out when they get something that they can get the food right away. And we, especially when we first introduce a new enrichment, we have to observe them very closely to make sure that they don't get upset with that. So we have gibbons that they got a puzzle feeder, and instead of working with it, they just throw it on the ground, or they get upset and just kind of hitting it and banging with it because they had a hard time figuring it out. So, but these guys are enjoy working on it, and it's not so easy. And so besides, I put some, blueberries and other small pieces of fruit in there. There's also some random low leaves, greens, that makes it a little bit harder for them to get to the fun fruits. And then there are also different toys that they like. And we have Goliath, who likes to play with rubber balls, but he doesn't like to play with a cone. Or we have Dennis, who likes to play with a stick, and he doesn't like any kind of artificial toys like rubber balls and cones. So they do have the preferences for that as well. And so besides puzzle feeders and small toys, we also try to give things inside the enclosure, like different swings, so they can utilize the whole space. Bungee cords, fire hoses, we sometimes build them hammocks. And there's also branches so they can kind of swing around and just kind of, again, just utilize the whole space. And then there's other type of enrichments, like things that make sound. Gibbons are very vocal, but they also like to make sounds with other things. So we have a couple gibbons that like to play with a stick just to hit things, and they like to play with the hardware. They bang it, or with the stainless steel buckets. They besides we use it to put food in it, they also like to just dump it and then bang with the bucket. So we sometimes give them hardware. They're not holding really anything. It's just there to so they can kind of shake it and make noise with it. And then other food enrichment that are like scented, like we use rose water sometimes and add it to their greens, or we buy some other greens like cilantro and parsley and mint, chives that are not as important for them nutritionally, but are interesting and they smell different, and we can kind of change it around, and everybody gets some sometimes. And they like insects. So in the wild, gibbons mainly eat fruits. About 60 to 70% of their diet is fruit, but they also eat young leaves and flowers. So we sometimes give them hibiscus flowers or roses, and we give them mealworms and crickets, and sometimes even cooked chicken. So just kind of give them a very variable diet, and we feed 6 to 8 times a day. So that's also, we do it just because gibbons are foragers and want to keep them active all day. So if anybody have questions about pileated gibbons, but if not, I will just move to another enclosure, and we're gonna go see some Devon gibbons.
We have a question. This one's more about just the gibbons in general. So Melita asks, do any of the gibbons have a challenging time adjusting to the California climate when they get here?
That's a great question, because Santa Clarita is not the rainforest. And we try to, when we import a gibbon, we want them to arrive during spring or fall. So not in like January when the coldest, and also not during the hottest part of the summer. So pretty much from like June to September, it can get very hot here. So it can be hard for them to adjust because it's just very different, very dry. And even if they're just coming from Europe or from another zoo in the US, we have to make sure that they can handle the weather. And also if there is any kind of transfer, even we send gibbons before to Arizona, it can get very hot there too. And they will travel, instead of flying, they would travel with a van. But we don't want them to travel in the hottest parts of the summer if the car breaks down or something happens. So before we import the gibbon, we have to quarantine them. And I mentioned that we are sending out one of her daughter. And at the same time, soon we're gonna also try to import a new male to introduce her because the two other offspring here, Boo also soon gonna be moved out, and Howard is 6, so probably in 2 years from now, he's gonna also move out. So we don't want her to be by herself. Alrighty, I'm gonna move to another enclosure. Oh. Are there any questions while I'm walking? I'm not going far. I show you my bucket. So what I have, so these, it's made of banana leaves and kind of a bell pepper holding it together. And just like the pipe, they also have like little pieces of soft fruits and berries inside. So we'll see if I can manage to put it through and give it to them.
So we have 2 questions. The first is, how often do gibbons vocalize?
Huh?
How often do gibbons vocalize is our first question.
Okay, so can you hear her? Just, she's vocalizing very softly because she also wants some food. So they vocalize kind of throughout the day for different reasons. And let me give her something as well. So that's Simpang, and she's checking that out. She's gonna eat the pepper first. So she was making feeding calls, and every time they see something they're edible and it's exciting, they will vocalize for it, and that's, we just call it feeding calls. But they also make alarm calls. So if there will be a snake inside the enclosure, she would let me know, and she would make an alarm call, and I would know where to look because they make very specific alarms for something on the ground or for like something like a bird, like a hawk flying very low. They make a very specific bird alarm. So we always know it is a bird, scare them. And then they have their territorial song that's they known most, that they sing a song to mark their territory. And most gibbons at the center will sing like 2-3 times a day, and starting at sunrise, and then between different feeding times, but usually during the morning hours. And then these guys, the Javan gibbons, are a little bit different because they don't sing every day, and they just not as vocal, and they also don't sing a duet song. From the 20 gibbon species, there's only 2 species that don't sing a duet, and they just sing solo songs. So Simpang, she's very lazy. Well, she likes her food, but she's just a lazy singer, and she's a little bit clumsy. She just dropped that whole thing. But she will sing maybe like once a week, and her voice is very deep. So we can recognize when she's actually singing that it's her. And they kind of also walking around here. Let's see. And then the male will sing a different part of the day. sometimes before sunrise, sometimes just between other gibbons singing, but they just don't join in with the other gibbon song. And so that's Parak sitting down there. And then Hercules is finishing the rest of the enrichment. And some just kind of fell on the ground. And they don't usually spend time on the ground, especially in the wild. It's very dangerous place for them to hang out on the ground. The natural predators like tigers, leopards can easily catch them if they are on the ground. Also, the rainforest floor can be very humid and they will just get infections there. But here the floor is dry and they drop some of the food, so Parak is picking it up.
I'm wondering if you've noticed, because you said that there are 5 species of gibbons at the center, right? And in the wild, a lot of times the species are not overlapping in the same environment. Is there any like evidence of like differences in their calls or their songs since they're around each other and they're kind of hearing these different sounds?
So what we see and notice that many of the species prefer to sing together and they coordinate with each other and they kind of have a routine. So usually in the morning, it's the northern white-cheeked gibbons. They are the one that get up the earliest and they start calling. So we have one female that's our lead singer. So she starts vocalizing and then her family joins in. And then the eastern Hulot gibbons, they are also very vocal and they join in right away with the white cheeks. And sometimes that's just these 2 species singing together. But then the second and the third song, there's more species joining. So we have gibbons that prefer to get up early and sing early. And there's also data in the wild that the gibbons, certain species sing different time of the day. So, but it's not just instinct. So we have one pileated gibbon that sometimes joins in with the early morning song, but then her family always sings just later around like 10 or 11 o'clock. They just don't like to sing early morning. They like to sleep in and they just don't join in with the early vocalizations. But one thing doesn't change. Gibbons don't learn a vocalization, so they don't learn different calls from other species. So we had before, and we have right now as well, there's 2 species housed together, and they try to coordinate. So both recognize the other one is singing, and there are parts that are somewhat similar, so they're able to coordinate those parts together, and they try to do that, but they will never learn each other's song. But they recognize their alarm calls as well. So if Simpeng here see a big bird and she makes a bird alarm, that's also species specific for the Javan gibbons, a pileated gibbon on the other part of the center doesn't see the bird, will answer with a bird alarm. So most likely they learn that, or they just have similar pattern and they can recognize that. Not sure exactly, but the thing is that they definitely react to each other alarm calls with the same one. Also, everybody knows there is food coming. When we start feeding and the first gibbons are vocalizing, there are certain mornings, like a cold morning, my coworker would give them baked apple. So that's just a very special breakfast. That's not something they get very often. And they vocalize, they're very excited about it. So everybody will hear that it's not green beans, the normal breakfast. That's something much more exciting. And it's just kind of spread. But the gibbons are kind of housed nearby. So they can also see what the other one's eating. And it's just kind of a chain reaction as they react to whether for the food or something scary out there. So going back to Javan gibbons, let me turn, they still kind of around. So I can show them. Oh, he's now just playing with his food. This is Hercules. So earlier you saw the pileated gibbons, and pileated gibbons are sexually dichromatic. Devon gibbons are the same color. So both the male and the female are gray, and they don't change color during their development. And their size, they usually around the same size, and there are, individual differences. Sometimes the female is a little bit bigger, sometimes the male is a little bit bigger. So, but they are on the same size. And they only find in Java, Indonesia. And they are also endangered for kind of the same reason, habitat loss and hunting. Oh, that's Barack, he's coming closer.
We had a student ask, how do you feed the babies?
I guess it's depend on the age. Let's see. So we'll go see some of our youngest one pretty soon. One is 1 month old, the other one is 5 months. The 5 months old trying to reach out for food, and this morning he managed to get a green bean. And eventually he took a couple bites and then he dropped it. And then I tried to hand him another one, and then the mom just kind of hit it out of my hand. So I don't necessarily need to try to feed him, but it's kind of nice. He's super cute when he's trying to reach for a piece of food. And the 1 month old is just breastfeeding. So after birth, if the mother is doing well, is taking care of the baby, we are very hands-off, and we don't have to do anything. We just monitor them very closely. But we had a few times when the baby was too weak, he wasn't nursing. We had a female who rejected her babies. That time we stepped in and we had to hand raise the baby. And then if we have to hand raise one, then we use baby formula, just the human baby formula, and baby bottle, and we just feed the baby like every 2-3 hours. And one thing that we learned, and it's very important, that even if we have to hand raise a baby, they need to have interaction with other gibbons, because otherwise they can become very imprinted to people. So if we hand raise a baby, we try to take them to their parents daily. So they kind of stay bonded with their parents, and they can recognize it's still their offspring, so we can reintroduce them. So and that's usually successful if they stay connected with the infant. Yeah. Somebody asking if there's any benefit using baby formula. Well, the reason we use the baby formula because it's easily available. And if we have to hand raise a baby, there's no way to get milk from the mother. So that's pretty much just what's available, the human baby formula.
And I imagine it's probably like human infants where, human infants, you do baby formula, and then after a year you can start giving like cow's milk, but you don't give cow's milk in the beginning because it's not as nutritious. It doesn't have the same kind of, caloric and things that the baby formula does, because baby formula is, modified after like primate milk. Is that similar?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, and we don't give cow milk at all.
Yeah.
So we just use the baby formula from the store, and once the infants start eating some solid food, then we introduce the solid food, and we continue giving the baby formula until about a year old. And we try to reintroduce them at around the same time, once they don't really need the baby formula. And then they get other, then they just kind of have a similar diet as the grown-up gibbons. So, but normally a gibbon baby will nurse until they are about 2.5, so much longer. But we also noticed that when we hand raised the infant that was born prematurely and we're able to reintroduce at 6 months old, he started nursing. So the reason the mother was still producing milk after 6 months, that infant had an older brother, and she let him continue nursing while we're hand raising the baby. So it's kind of all worked out. Yeah. Alrighty, let's go see some other gibbons. So we are going to see some northern white-cheeked gibbons, and this is where we have our youngest one. And so she was born in March 25th. So it's just it's 1 month old today.
What about lifespan? What's the average lifespan of gibbons in the wild compared to in captivity? And it probably varies based on the species, so that might not be a great question.
Well, their average lifespan is about 40 years. And in the wild, they tend to live into their 30s. But there could be individuals there as well that are into their like early 40s. And the oldest living gibbon, he lives in South Carolina, and he's 62. So that's very, very special. And I know there's some other older gibbons that are in their 50s, late 40s and early 50s. So certain individuals can live much longer. So our oldest one is only 39. And it's also possible there are differences between species. We just don't have enough data yet. So let me turn around. He got scared of something. I better give them another one because I don't want them to fight. This is Pierre. So this is Ostrix, and the little one is just on her chest, but she's sleeping, so it's hard to see. I wonder if I turn my screen, it will turn. I don't know. Is that better? That is much better. And she's vocalizing because she's excited for the food, and you can kind of see the little baby on her. And that's Anastasia. That's another offspring. Oh, mom just took it out of her hand, the other one as well.
So you mentioned that they're monogamous. So mom's obviously breastfeeding and carrying the baby. What's dad's role?
Dad's role, he's not sharing his food right now. Dad is very, very playful. And where did she go? She dropped it. So the father usually provide care for the oldest offspring. So if there's only one, then they just kind of, doing the grooming and protecting their territory. But here it's very interesting that we have now 2 offspring, and kind of a big week before the new infant was born, Anastasia, the older offspring, started to spend more and more time with the dad, Pierre, just walking by, and would kind of look like that she's gonna settle down and sleep with him at night. And he was about to like just kind of settle with her and sleep with her and hold her. But because there was no baby yet, Anastasia could go back and forth between the mom and the dad. And eventually she would settle to go to bed with mom. But just the day before the new baby was born, she actually went to bed with the dad. And now that mom has the new baby, she always sleeps with, of course, the new baby, and Anastasia sleeps with dad. And during the day, because mom is kind of busy with the baby, they just hang out and they spend a lot of time playing and grooming each other, sharing food with each other, which usually means Anastasia just steals the food from dad. And but Pierre, the father, also spend a lot of time with the mom, and we can see them sometimes mating. They spend a lot of time grooming. So and you also will see ostrich, the mother, grooming the daughter, and from time to time kind of giving her a hug. So it's the whole family is kind of together. Let's see if there's anything happens right now. And the mother usually is more dominant than the rest of the family members. And especially here, ostrich can be a little bit food aggressive. So if she wants the food, she usually doesn't let anyone steal it. And here, the little one picking up things. So during feeding times, you always feed mom first and make sure she got enough.
And is that because she's breastfeeding, so she's needing more calories, or is that just her personally?
It's kind of both. So sometimes when you introduce a couple, the male is a couple years older and or bigger, and they will be more dominant. And once the female is pregnant, even if they are smaller and younger than the male, they usually become more dominant. And they don't get stronger. They definitely need more food, and they turn a little bit food aggressive and kind of chase away the male if they don't feel they get enough food. So, but in most cases, the dominance is not as strict. So there are individual differences, and we know ostrich, she's just a little bit too aggressive over food. The baby is teasing, and he's trying to put his knee in his mouth, her mouth. We know it's a female. She's just adorable, and now he's trying to nurse. And then here comes Anastasia, try to take the iPad. No, you can have it.
And Melita's asking, do gibbons make nests?
No, and that's one difference between the great apes and the small apes, the gibbons, that gibbons don't build a nest, and they often just sleep on a tree in a sitting up position. But here, because it gets colder than it will be in the tropical rainforest, we give them sleeping boxes, and they usually accept that right away. But they don't like any like bedding materials, like blankets or any kind of nesting materials. So if we give them blankets, they will play with it, but they don't want to sleep with it. There are some individuals that might sleep on a blanket during the time when they are recovering from an exam or after a surgery or something. And while they are inside in a small holding area, they would use a blanket, but outside they don't want it. The baby is vocalizing, and as soon as she cries, the mom will adjust her. So she just wanted to nurse, and she was holding too low, and she expressed her frustration. So she just pushed her a little bit higher, and now she's happy nursing. And Anastasia really wants to get the iPad. So in this age, Anastasia is 3, and she's very playful, and she's very active, very mischievous. So the species is critically endangered. There's less than 1,000 left in the wild, and they are extinct in China, but they still find in Laos and Vietnam. And we have the same issues with this species as well, the hunting and the habitat loss. Hunting sometimes just to eat them, but also for using them in traditional medications, to using them in ceremonies. There are collectors that want to have like gibbon schools, just a collection of different primate schools. There are people that are using gibbon bones as a chopsticks. And in many places also capturing the babies just to sell them as a pet. And it's a terrible thing because they actually shoot the parents from the tree and they wait until the mother fell, and then they just sell these tiny babies, like couple months old babies, put them in a bird cage, and they really don't even know how to care for them. So it's just a very terrible industry. In the US, they have a species survival plan. So the two other species that we talked before, the pileated and the Javan gibbons, there's very few of them in the US, but they're doing a little bit better in a while. They are still endangered, but there are more than 1,000 left. And then the white cheek gibbons is only 1,000 left, but they're in a successful captive breeding program, and there's several ones in the US. So they do have a species survival plan for them right now. And we collaborate with them, and we have 12 of them born here. One thing that are interesting, that for some reason there's a more male offspring born than female, but we are very lucky here. We have these 2 female offspring recently. Now mom wants the iPad too. And you see how long is their arms. So gibbon arms is 1.5 times longer than the legs. So as we care for them, we have to be very alert so they don't steal things.
And Stephen asks about how the coat patterns change for this specific species as they age.
The color?
Yeah, is this the same as the one we were looking at earlier where the males turn black and the females stay blonde?
No, it's different. So so as you see, the baby is the same color as the mother. So they born orange or blonde to blend in with the mother fur. And by the time they're about 1.5 years, they're gonna be turned black, but it's a slow change. So once we go see the 5 months old, you will see that the 5 months old have black fingers and toes, but the rest is still orange. So, but at the time, once they are 1.5 years, they're gonna be black and they will have those white cheeks. Both male and a female will turn black. And then when the female is around 6.5, 7 years old, they will change color a second time and slowly turn back to blonde. And Anastasia keep trying to steal the food from mom, and she's kind of letting her, but she also give her a big open mouth, which was a slight aggression. So, but going back to color change, so Anastasia, she's a little girl and she's black. She looks like Dad. There, it's turning back to us. Once she's around 6.5, 7, first her white cheek will start turning orange, and then eventually she's gonna start seeing lighter fur coming out under the black. And by the time she's around 8 or 9, she's gonna finish the color change. So right now she looks like a male, and it protects her from breeding too early. Because by the time she finishes the color change, she's gonna be pushed out of the family. So it prevents inbreeding and protecting her from mating too early. And then they say the infant is the same color as the mom to just kind of hide the baby, and the infant kind of blend in with the mother. And you can see them walking upright. Pierre especially has a very straight posture. And then the other things with the color change, when the infant's born, they are pink and they almost hairless. They actually very tiny too. They weigh less than 1 pound. But they are pink, and then it takes a couple of weeks for them to change the skin to dark. Uh-oh, somebody got to hand over my iPad. All right, we're gonna, is there any questions?
Yes, we have one. What's been your most memorable experience at the sanctuary?
Wow. Definitely every birth is super exciting. But we also had some scary events. Fires. In 2007, there's a big fire was coming through. Was very, very windy, and it was just a very scary time. It came through like so quickly. There was no time to, capturing and evacuating gibbons. And we're very lucky that we were able to kind of protect the center and shelter in place. So that was a very scary time. And when I worked with Alan, the founder, for 7 years. He passed away when he was only 60 years old, and it was also very, sudden and unexpected things that he went to the hospital for schedule a surgery, and his heart gave up, and we were not prepared to lose the director and the founder. And we kind of managed to continue the center and his work, but that was a very rough year. And I kind of have to learn how to run the place, and from being a caregiver and a scientist, kind of figure out how to continue his work and care for the center. So there were a couple of big things that happened. But I've been around for so many things, I've seen many of them born here, grow up here. There are also gibbons that we lost, and we get very attached to them. So each loss is like losing, a family member. So there's so many things. So, all right, let's go see some other ones. So we'll go see the same species, and we'll go see the oldest offspring. So you can see kind of a difference, what happens in like 5 months.
What was the name of the last species we were looking at?
So northern white-cheeked gibbons, and the extinct in China, but they find in Laos and Vietnam. And you can already hear them. So let me turn this around. So we have here Lucia. We might need some help here.
So Melita's asking, the second color change, that's to blend in with the newborn, or so the newborn blends in with the mom?
So the newborn blends in with the mom, and the first color change, it happens when the infant is like 6 months old. It starts changing color slowly. So if she comes back, they all left. You will see that the infant has darker fingers and toes, but he's still kind of the same color as the mom. So the first color change is both male and female will turn black. And it takes more than a year to finish the color change. We have a lot of sunlight. And then the second color change is just when the female, when they are around 6.5, 7 years old, they turn back to blonde. So a juvenile, both male and a female are black. And then when the female is 6.5, 7, they change back to orange. So up there, it's Lucia, the orange one, that's the mom, and Cantor, both just kind of happy eating their food. And it's kind of hard to see the low one, but once they finish eating, they will come back closer. So both Lucy and Cantor were born here, and we introduced them about 2 years ago. And then the offspring, Winky, was born in October. And so he's now almost 6 months old. You kind of see his little hand. He's eating everything, but he's still nursing. The gestation period is 6.5 months, and they usually have single births. And then the first 2-3 months, they really just breastfeeding and holding on the mother 24/7. And then at around 2-3 months, they start tasting a little bit of solid food and they start climbing the mom. So this low one is not able to climb around. And but if he's scared of something or if he's cold, he cries and then mom will get him. And he's interacting and playing with dad a little bit. But usually when they do that, they are right next to it, right next to the mom. So this is Cantor here. He's looking if there's any other food left. Now you can see his foot again, which is so interesting. And they make these little grunts and squeaks that just feeding calls, just excitement for the food. And we are between 2 feeding times. So this was like, you know, surprise. So they were very excited about it. Are there any questions?
I know the answer to this, but I think it would be worthwhile for the students to hear because I don't think they might know. But can you tell them why you're wearing a mask?
Yes. We are closely related to gibbons, and many of the infectious disease can be easily transferred between humans and gibbons. And we're still very concerned about the new virus, the COVID-19. So since the pandemic started, we started wearing masks during just general care. Before, we would only wear the mask when we were doing a routine checkup and we were very close to the gibbons, and they were anesthetized, and we're doing like blood work and TB tests and other checkups. So, but now if we are within 6 feet of the gibbon enclosure, we always wear the mask. And, you know, we are open to visitors. So when the people come in, they also have to wear a mask.
And they also clean their shoes in the solution too, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's the little one. Let's see, let me show you his fingers. He's kind of holding his low toes closed, but you can see his low hand. So the fingers and the feet is just darker, and otherwise he's still kind of the same color as mom, and and he's nursing. And sometimes he's nursing just for comfort, so it's not always for the breast milk. It's just to be safe and comfortable.
We have a question. Have any of the gibbons been diagnosed with COVID?
No, but we kind of the beginning of the pandemic, our oldest male, Ivan, developed kind of upper respiratory symptoms. And we tested him for COVID. It was negative, and we did a bunch of other tests like Wally fever, many different things, and blood work, and we did an X-ray. And unfortunately, he had lung cancer. So besides all the different infectious disease, they can also have very similar illnesses like diabetes, arthritis, heart, kidney disease. These are the things that we see at the center. And we had another female that had cancer. That was just a very aggressive type of sarcoma. Started on her foot and eventually metastasis to her liver and kidney. And Ivan, this older male, he would sneeze like not very frequently, like once or two sneeze per hour. So not as bad, but before he was, fine. So we wanted to look into what happened. So I think at this point, if any of the gibbon have any upper respiratory symptoms or just generally not feeling well, we will just routinely check for COVID. But we are super careful. The staff is vaccinated. All the volunteers also have to be vaccinated, and we wear the mask, and we mainly working with the gibbons outside. So unless we have one in our indoor area in a recovery room, but mostly everybody's outside. So. And they also developed vaccines for primates, large cats, so some other endangered species. And the issue with the vaccine that they developed for animals, that it's kind of the old way to create vaccines. So it's just a killed virus that they use. And we're not sure if it was working for every new version of the COVID virus. So at this point, we haven't vaccinated for vaccinated the gibbon.
And we have a question from Melita about how often they stand up or they walk on two legs.
I guess it's depend on the individual. We have gibbons that they almost look like the ground, that is like they don't want to touch it with their feet, so they just try to reach down if they drop something, and they don't want to walk across. And then we have gibbons that are very comfortable, just kind of hanging out on the ground and playing and just sitting, relaxing there. So like this couple, they kind of somewhere between. They often run across the floor, and sometimes there's a little gap between the tarp and the floor, and they sometimes look there to see who's coming because they're just very curious. So, but they never just sit on the ground and hang out. So if they want to relax, then they usually relax on the upper platform or on the branches, fire hose. It was Lucia is vocalizing. She's seeing another gibbon. So that wasn't a friendly vocalization. All right, we're gonna go see another species. Here we have Eastern Hulot gibbons. Oh. They look kind of similar to the white cheek gibbons. They are also sexually dichromatic. So the female is blonde. It's just more lighter blonde, so it's not orange. And then the male is black. And instead of a white cheeks, they have those good-looking white eyebrows and a white goatee. Betty's working on a puzzle feeder, and Kima is picking up whatever's Betty's dropping. But I will just give them another one. And then the sound that they are making, those are guttural sounds that's unique for the species. and they make that sound whenever they are excited about something. And they go through the, good job, Kima. They go through the same color change as the northern white-cheeked gibbons. So they born blonde, blend in with the mother fur, and then they turn black by the time they are a year and a half. And then the female at around 6.5, 7 change color again and turn back to blonde. The species found in Myanmar, Northeast India, and southern China. And the eastern hula gibbons are the only species of gibbons that are not endangered or critically endangered. Today, the status is vulnerable. And in Myanmar, there's still a lot of forest left. So that's why they're doing a little bit better. And
Sorry.
yeah.
I was just gonna ask, do any of the females change back to black after they become like post-menopausal?
Yes. If they live into like late 30s or more like 40s, they start changing darker. And that's true for both the huloks and the white-cheeked gibbons. And they're not gonna completely turn black, but they're gonna get much darker. Also, to prevent any pregnancies, we use birth control implant. And if you give them the implant when they haven't finished the color change, it will kind of slow it down. So behind the color change, there's hormonal changes. And if you use hormonal birth control, that will kind of affect their color change.
Is that why the females turn from black to orange right before they have or their fertile age?
Yes, yeah. So it's behind the color change, there's hormonal changes. And we were working with a researcher to document that. And we were sending her fecal samples and photographs to kind of follow the color change and study the hormonal changes around the same time. And then there are other changes. So right now we're looking at hula gibbons, and their vocalizations, the male and the female is kind of the same. But earlier we were looking at the northern white-cheeked gibbons, and in that species, the male and the female has very distinct vocalizations for the male and the female. So, but the young ones, they sing the female part. They sing along with their mother, and they just sing the full great call, which is the female song. And then once the male is around 6.5, 7 years old, they start practicing the male part. And behind the song change, there's also hormonal changes. So, and it takes, like, the color change can take over a year to kind of finish. The song change can take also more than a year. And a young male would continue joining with the female part, but at the same time also practicing the male song. And like an older one would usually just stick with the male song.
I think we have one more question, and that's how fast do they brachiate?
They say that gibbons in the forest can travel up to 35 miles per hour. So I saw wild gibbons in Java. I was very lucky to see them because you can spend, months there and you will only hear them. They're just very shy animals, and it felt like they were just flying through the forest. It was very, very amazing to see them.
I probably know the answer to this, but I'm curious. Have there ever been any gibbons that have been bought as pets by someone and then like abandoned?
Yeah, of course, there's many of them. So there are sanctuaries in Asia that has hundreds of gibbons, like Shani, run a sanctuary. He's a French guy, and he rescued many gibbons, and he tried to rehabilitate them and release them back into the wild. But you know, you can only release them if they are healthy, physically and mentally, and they have a place to release them. So his center purchasing land and try to protect and protect the remaining forest for the gibbons so they can release those rescued gibbons. There's also 2 sanctuaries in Java, 20 to 40 gibbons in each sanctuary, also try to release them back. So the issue with the pet gibbons, and if you look at Betty, she was a pet gibbon. So they capturing them when they are babies, and they don't know how to care for them. Sometimes they transfer a human disease to them, or they just give them a very bad diet. And when by the time they're an adult, they're not gonna be healthy. You know, just not having a good diet at a young age can affect them for their whole life. And sometimes if they had a lot of human interaction, they're not able to bond with another gibbon. So it can cause a lot of problems. So these 2 are an interesting couple. So Betty was a rescued gibbon. She couldn't have any offspring because her body is just not healthy. She's not a full-size gibbon. Her hips was very narrow. She just not able to give birth. So she had a couple stillborn babies, but she's a very sweet gibbon, and she was fostering other younger gibbons. So that male that housed with Betty was also an orphan. He wasn't a pet gibbon, but his mother was a pet gibbon who rejected all her babies because she don't have very strong mother instinct. So we take care of his babies when they were very young, and then they were introduced to Betty, and she took care of them. So we don't want Betty to have any offspring, we know, because she can carry them full term. So she has birth control implants to prevent any more pregnancies. And then Kima's mother was one of her offspring was reintroduced to her, and she's also on birth control because she, you know, she doesn't take care of her offspring. So so yeah, that's the problem. And if you hand raise them, if you interact with them a lot at a young age, by the time they're an adult, they can be territorial towards the same-sex human. They can be very like unpredictable, and they could be also dangerous. So there's a lot of problems later on. She got scared. Any more questions?
I think that's it. I don't see any in the chat, but thank you so much for answering all of our questions and for showing us the gibbons. This was super, super interesting and really fun.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. And if anyone have more questions, they can email me. We have the website, so there are also some information there. We have produced a documentary that you can rent it now for free. And there's also some story on different gibbons and about the whole center. So.
And what's the name of the documentary?
The documentary is called The Center, Gibbons and Guardians.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.